Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Thanks,
I'm like,
Marissa. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Danielle Dresser. I'm the Fresh Fiction Editorial Manager, and we're here at Love Sweet Arrow tonight to talk to Alexis Daria and Zoraida Cordova. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for hosting, Danielle.
Yes, of course. No, this is like so much fun. So I'm really happy to do it. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that to submit their questions along the side and on the YouTube chat. If you go to Love Sweet Arrow YouTube page, there's a chat. And I will, between myself and Marissa, who is offline now, we'll be monitoring the chat to ask your questions to our fabulous guests. And then one other reminder, please go to lovesweetarrow.com. You can buy both of their books there, as well as any other book there, and some really fun merchandise. So without further ado, I was wondering if whoever wants to start, one of you can start and just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your latest releases.
Okay, you go first, Alexis, because your book just came out.
Yeah. All right. So my name is Alexis Daria, and my book, You Had Me at Hola, just came out a couple of weeks ago. It is a romance novel between two actors who are on a telenovela together that's being filmed in New York City, and they fall in love.
I love it. My name is Zoraida Cordova, but in my romance life, I am Zoe Castile. And I'm the author of the Happy Ending series, which is about male entertainers looking for their happily ever afters. So the first book is called Stripped. The second book is Hired, and the third book is Flashed. So those are my books.
Awesome.
And in another life, I'm also a young adult author.
Yeah, and so Zoraida, I was gonna say, and you write as Zoe Castile for your romance, but I was gonna say, well, you can talk about whatever genre you would like when it comes to these questions. So the title of this chat is The Craft and Creation of Romance. And kind of when Marissa and I were talking about it a little bit, we thought it would just be kind of fun to kind of go through kind of from the beginning. So if you guys could start by talking about your publishing journeys, what drew you to writing, and what it was like on the way to your debut novels.
Yeah, so I started publishing in 2012 with the book The Vicious Deep, which is about a teenage boy who discovers his merman lineage and that his mother was a mermaid princess, and now he is trying to compete for the sea throne. But he's just a dumb lifeguard from Coney Island who just wants to have parties and like mac on girls. So things go awry for him. And so that was my first series. And it took me about 10 years to publish that book. And even though it sounds like a really long time, I also started very early. I started trying to become a published author when I was in high school because I saw an author who was 14 years old when she published her first book with Random House. And I didn't know a lot about publishing, but I knew that, wow, Random House is a real publisher and they're publishing a teenage girl. So this means that I can be a writer too. And I think that even though the book in question, the author in question, we had nothing in common. You know, she was a white girl from Massachusetts and I was an Ecuadorian immigrant from Queens, New York. But at the end of the day, we were both teenage girls who loved books about magic, and seeing even a fraction of something reflected back at me just let me know that that it was possible, right? And nobody told me no. My mother never said, you know, we didn't come to this country so you could be an artist. She just worried a lot. And so after that, I just pursued it until finally something stuck. You know, I wrote several books before that. And in 2014, I started writing romance as myself, but then I decided to launch a pen name. And I've written 15 novels. As of September 1st, I will have 15 books published.
Yeah, congratulations.
I'm really tired.
Yeah. All right, Alexis?
So I know the book Zoraida is talking about because I also read it when I was a teenager, and I think I was already older than the author when I read the book, and I was like, wow, I'm late. And at the time when I was a teenager, I was writing fan fiction, and I'd already been, writing just like my own little stories for a few years. But it was always just this like fun thing that I did for myself. But the thing that I was studying at the time was fine arts. So that was my focus. I was an artist.
Yeah.
So I always wrote, I started doing NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, in 2004. And that was great at keeping me writing when life got really hard. Because it was like, okay, at least every November, I will have a place and a time and a community around this thing that I love to do, but that I'm struggling to find time for in kind of, my adult life. So it really wasn't until I think the year I turned 30 that I was like, let me actually try to like take this seriously. Like, what would happen if I actually gave writing a fair shot? And that was, I already had met you, Zoraida.
Yeah, didn't we meet because of NaNoWriMo?
I think so, but I also remember meeting you at Lady Jane's salon because you were like having a launch party or something there after one of the readings. And
I did have it in 2013. I think it was the sequel to The Vicious Deep, or one of them that they let me read for something.
Yeah, so I think that's when we met. So I was not published yet and really just starting to think like, okay, maybe this is something that I can take a little bit more seriously. So that was also around the time that I started writing romance, because before that I was really writing more like fantasy and a lot of vampire stuff and like urban fantasy, like, because that's what I was reading too. And then in 2017, I got my first deal, and it was not the first book I'd written, not the first romance I'd written, and that was when Take the Leap came out and Dance With Me. So my first two books came out in 2017.
Do you think you'll ever write like a paranormal or an urban fantasy at some point? Awesome. That sounds great.
Nobody wanted to buy it then.
Yeah, no, that's really cool though. I had no idea that's like where you had started. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So moving on, Alexis, I wanted to ask you specifically, and Zoraida, or as Zoe, I think, what are some of the challenges of writing contemporary romance?
Okay, it's gonna sound terrible. For me, it was that feeling that it was like a little bit boring compared to paranormal, like from a writing perspective, like, oh, these are just like normal people and there's like no magic or, secret societies, although, who knows, but so I think that's why I write about people who are involved in the entertainment industry, because there is like a little bit of a level of magic there in terms of like how things happen. But I also really just try to show that these are people who are creative people who are working on their craft, and this is their job, and also, their calling a little bit. So they take it seriously, whether they're dancers or actors or whatever, but this is the thing that they're trying to do and find success in.
Yeah.
I think that for me, the challenge is reader expectations. I learned between my first romance novel and Flashed that there are certain things that readers really want to see. And because there is no reader as loyal as a romance reader, I try to compromise between the story that I want to tell and the thing that I know is going to either be received well. That's not to say that I don't make my own decisions. But I do think about, for instance, some of the critique for my first series was that they really wanted to know the couple was together. Like, are they together at the end? And I'm like, well, yeah, they're together. They're like kissing. It's the end. But like the romance reader wants that they want her to be pregnant or like married or the potential, which is, and I it's a Jane Austen thing, right? Like it ends with a marriage proposal
Right.
or wedding. And I think that is something that it's like, it's beautiful. And if it makes sense for my characters, I always remind myself that this is a possibility for an end, right? And romances have to end happily. So, or at least, they have to be together. Otherwise it's not a romance. So there are some things, I know we're not supposed to read our reviews, but I do in the beginning, because it was a new genre for me. I thought that those things were very helpful to see where the disconnect was between what, I considered Silver Linings Playbook a romance. And then people were like, what's wrong with you? It was terrible. And I'm like, yeah, but so it's like the quirky, the quirky romance versus the contemporary romance, very, very different things. And so I quickly learned those things from a craft perspective.
Yeah. So,
to jump off of that, I think this is where the epilogue in romance novels can be like such a strong storytelling tool.
Yeah.
Like
epilogue, I'm pregnant.
Well, like I decided with my dance off series that there were going to be no babies, no pregnancies, no marriages or proposals.
Yeah.
At all at the end of any of those books. Like, especially because these are dancers, like, they really have to consider that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This series, who knows? But, I think for me, it's to just show, and also as a reader to know that to see them a little bit further down the line and, that they're still together, that they're still strong, that they've like made some changes in their lives to accommodate now having another person involved in it. But for me, I also just like to show that they are not just happy, but like successful. Like that thing that they were working toward in the book has also come to pass. Like, I don't want to give any spoilers for this book, but they like that they're getting what they want.
Yeah.
So I think the epilogue can really like kind of do a lot of heavy lifting that way, especially if your declaration of love comes like right at the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think you both made excellent points about like kind of reader expectations. And especially, I mean, I think romance readers in particular are like super smart readers. Like, I think we all recognize the different beats within a novel that you are supposed to hit in some way, shape, or form. But then I think it's also really awesome when someone can take something and turn it and it's still satisfying. And I think that's when, you kind of hear like when people talk about when books transcend the genre or, or just like take it in a new direction. So that's really cool. To hear. So Zoraida, you kind of touched on this because you explained, how you got started and everything, and you write in so many different genres and subgenres and everything. So I was wondering, is there a genre you consider harder to write in than others?
So yes. I think that for me, sci-fi and fantasy is harder because the set of rules also apply in addition to I'm just grabbing my book covers, which are stacked on top of like I just did a Twilight marathon. So this is my last book, YA Incendiary, and this is a high fantasy which is set in a world inspired by Inquisition Spain. And so for there, I did research of like, what does medieval Spain look like? What did 1400 Spain look like? What did the Inquisition look like? How does anybody even want to love anybody? The book one's not a romance, but book two is romance on crack. And so I think that it's harder for me to do the world building because I have to always be conscious of the rules. The same thing went for, I wrote a novel for Star Wars, for the Star Wars universe called A Crash of Fate. And that is, it's a romance set in the Star Wars. Why can't I say the word Star Wars? In the Star Wars world. And that's this one, A Crash of Fate. And it's between two friends, like, who reunite after 13 years, and then they have to like deliver a parcel to dangerous people or die trying. And so it's like a love story set in 24 hours. And for that, I had to do the romance. To me was the easiest part, because it is, how do I bring these two people together in 24 hours? How do I make their love story believable? They're both 18, 19. How do I convince not just the reader, but my characters, that they need to stop being dumb and be together? And then that to me that's the easy part. The hard part is like figuring out how a speeder works, so that I can control the scene where their speeder breaks down and they have to like push it like a car on neutral. You know, how does what are the intragalactic politics that are affecting this outpost, which all play a part into the Star Wars world. You know what it is? I can't say Star Wars and world together. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So how the Star Wars galaxy, like how do those rules change this entire universe? And that in itself is a challenge, because, which is not to say that contemporary doesn't have its own set of rules or world building, because it absolutely does. But there's a level of research and a level of fact finding, or making sure that your facts from chapter 1 are still the same facts in chapter 35, that you have to be conscious of. So it's like two stories in one. And for me, that's the challenge in what I'm writing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for answering. That was like a great answer to my question. So Alexis, a couple of weeks ago during the virtual date night with Alyssa Cole, you kind of talked about this, and I found it absolutely fascinating, about how you had to write a story within your story of You Had Me at Ola, because the two main characters are actors on a new show. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit more about that. Did you plot out the entire plot of the TV show? And, you know, just like kind of what that whole experience was like.
Oh yeah. I really couldn't start writing the book until I had figured that part out, because I kind of got up to the point where they start filming, and then I was like, what are they doing? You know, I don't know what the show is. It's a very loose kind of idea. But I had to figure out both how I was going to show it on the page, and then what actually was going to be happening on this show.
Right.
So I wanted to make it different from my previous series, both to challenge myself and also so that it would just be different for readers. So I decided that I was going to have the characters like be in character as the people they were playing. You know, and then like, how do I show that those are different kinds of chapters? Okay, well, I start with the script heading. I never got around to coming up with episode titles. So just like episode 1, scene, you know, with the animals or whatever. And they, you know, I had to figure out like, okay, who are these characters? What is their story? You know, there's a romance going on between them also. So that's also got to be another satisfying romance.
Right.
You know, what is happening in each scene. So just a little bit of background if people haven't read the book. The main characters in the book are Jasmine and Ashton, and they play Carmen and Victor on this show called Carmen in Charge. And Carmen works in PR, and Victor is like an international singer, internationally famous singer, but he needs to revamp his image. And Carmen also is his ex-wife. So there's this like kind of added layer of conflict there. And it's a family business, and, you know, they kind of need to take this job. So in each episode, I was figuring out like, what is Carmen going to do in this episode to try to improve Victor's image? You know, I had to figure out how many episodes it was going to be, and like, what is each thing that she does? And I did talk to a couple of my friends, Susanna Irwin and Suzanne Tierney, who are both, they're they're from my Golden Heart class, and they had some like background in this stuff. So I was like, okay, what would she do as a PR person to like fix this guy's image? And they were like, anything with kids, with like puppies and kittens, charity work, you know, pop-up concerts, all that kind of stuff. So I figured all of that out, and then had to show just like one scene from each of those episodes too. So figuring that out. And then just this way of like having them be in the characters' heads, but also like little breaks in the fourth wall. So you know that it's still Jasmine and Ashton. So you're still connected to them as the characters, and getting like their own little realizations and thoughts as they're acting. But yeah, it took me a long time to figure out how to handle all of that. And then once I did that, it was like, okay, now the rest of the story is unlocked and I can finally write this book.
Yeah. So there is a chat question that is related to this a little bit, but Jennifer was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the intimacy coordinator, because that is I think it's a pretty important part of how your two main characters come together.
Yeah, so intimacy coordinators are a real thing. They started in theater. There's a New York Times article from, I think, early last year maybe, that talks about it. And that was kind of the first place that I saw it. And I talked to a friend of mine who writes as Evie Klein, who has worked in theater, and she was the one who kind of like put me in this direction, because originally the story didn't include that. So it was going to be, I think, more what people expect of the book, where it's like, oh, they're going to be like, hey, we should get together and practice kissing. Like, won't that make it easier? Yeah. But like today, that's like really, like, you can't do that.
Right.
Like, people have careers, and that could like really screw up their careers.
Yeah.
So the kissing practice happens like with the intimacy coordinator kind of directing them. So it is something that's getting used more on film and TV sets to make sure that like consent is present at every level for the actors who are involved in the scene, to make sure that everybody's comfortable, to make sure that the production or the directors are not like pushing them to do things that they have not agreed to. You know, and it kind of takes them through everything. So that was like just another way that I could kind of like flip it a little bit and be like, okay, you know, they're doing kissing practice, but not how you think.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I found that, in fact, the person, Jennifer, in the chat I'm watching right now, I was just thinking this on this show. I remember reading a pretty in-depth article on the new Hulu show, Normal People. And it's kind of a very, you know, I mean, it's very sexy, and it's based off of a pretty successful book that came out, I think, a few years ago. And it's a lot of sex. but yeah, and they worked really heavily with an intimacy coordinator too. So that was, I mean, it was like I read that article and then I was reading your book, and so it all just like kind of came at the same time. So that's really cool. So moving on, I was wondering if you guys do anything to like get in the mind frame to like sit down and write. Like, do you have to have like a certain setup? Do you listen to music? Do you not listen? You know, do you need silence? Can you guys give me a little bit about like kind of your actual writing process?
I mean, it's definitely been different since the pandemic started. You know, I really feel like this whole year, every time I like start writing again, it like I have to trick myself into it. You know, like I have a playlist on Spotify that I'll listen to, and yes, Arida has Maluma on it just for you. I have a Pinterest board. I even made like just like a one graphic collage of like the characters and stuff. And my current setup, like this is my laptop screen, but like right above and behind it, I have like my bigger monitor. So I will sometimes open up that graphic on the laptop, and then I have the Scrivener document up on top. So that way when my mind wanders, I am just looking at pictures that will kind of tie me back to the story instead of like opening up a browser and going on Twitter.
Right.
So it's like keeping me there. I also have been, I've been journaling pretty regularly, like almost every single day for the last few months, just to like keep myself writing. I've had to let myself write like other little things, like I started a fanfic that nobody's gonna read. I wrote a short story earlier this summer just because like I had to just get myself writing something.
Right.
But I don't know, it's hard right now.
It is. And I think that since March, I've been on several deadlines. And even though the books aren't specifically romance, they are romance adjacent, as in they have very central love stories. And I have to sort of keep reminding myself why romance is important and why it's going to be important in the next, from now on, right? Why messages of hope and love and all of that woo-woo stuff needs to propel us to keep creating, because we're going to need these stories
Right.
when we start picking ourselves back up again, right? Whenever that is. And I feel very strongly about, I used to feel very strongly about my setup, right? I have an office which I share with two other friends. It's called Deadline City, and we named, my friend Danielle Clayton and I, we named a podcast after it. And that office was like my safe haven, because I could go in there. I mean, it was also unhealthy because I would be in there for like 14 hours a day. You know, show up at 9, leave at 11, and that's it. 11 p.m. So like, whatever. But now then that was taken away, right? That's gone. I have since made an office at home, which, you know, it's also very privileged to say like, oh, I have an office somewhere else, but it's what I needed for that time period. And now that I'm working from home again, because I did that for, you know, for the first like 8 years of my writing career anyway, I had to change the way that I write. And it's harder because I hate everything. Like I hate the news. I hate like my, you know, everything around me, right? Except for my brother, because he's here. So but it's like that feeling of hopelessness it gets in the way of your creative work. And what one of my old poetry teachers, Leonard D. Moore, would say, your important literary work. And so all of that stuff, it used to be easier for me to push it aside and to ignore it. But now it's not so easy to do that, because I just want to lay on the couch and watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine for 6 seasons without stopping, because it's just dumb humor, and my stories are a little bit more serious, and they need an exertion of emotion that I don't want to give, because I don't want to feel anything, because the world sucks. So, but I still do it because, again, it's like a cyclical disaster of, and now reminding myself stories are important. Love stories are incredibly important.
Right.
And then psyching myself up to get back onto the page. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I used to go to a writing space also. It was like a co-working space for writers, which I forgot about. Like I forgot that I used to go there every day. And, you know, like I paid for a desk there so I could actually leave my things on it, and just every day, like get up and go there. And then when I couldn't go anywhere, like at the beginning of this, like I think I was working on some stuff for the book, and I was just like sitting at home, and my boyfriend would be sitting there playing video games, and I'm like trying to like go through stuff with the book, and I was just like losing it.
Yeah.
So I have been able to set up a writing space kind of adjacent to our apartment, and it's been working. But I also usually like to start projects by taking a solo writing retreat, where I go somewhere for a few days that is like completely by myself, and like my time and my schedule is completely my own. I'm in a different space, so I'm not thinking about like all of my, you know, my own like weird attachments to the stuff in my apartment, or like the mess in the kitchen or whatever. You know, I don't have to think about any of that. And I haven't been able to do that. And it's just been really, really hard to find like just a long stretch of time where I don't have to like talk to anybody else if I don't want to. You know, my poor boyfriend, he's like, you've been like working all day and like, I just want to say hi to you. And you're like, don't talk to me. But I just like, I need to just be with my book.
Yeah.
To really get it going. So each little bit that I've been writing has just been like a struggle because I haven't had that time or space.
Yeah.
But, and then there's some days where I'm like, man, I really wish I could just go to a cafe and do some,
right.
Sit with a notebook or like read a book there and have an iced tea, like something.
Eavesdrop on the hipsters.
Yeah, just well, around here there's like so many students, so there's like always something to see.
Yeah.
Nearby, but you know,
Yeah.
and it's opened like my local cafe, so I'll go sometimes to just pick something up and like, you know, leave them a nice tip because I want them to stay open. But
You're right. Yeah.
yeah, there's just like nowhere else to go.
That's how I feel because I have a 6-year-old, and after this chat, this water will be wine because we're on day 2 of remote learning. But even like, you know, after just like sitting at home, like I was like, let's go to Starbucks, go through the drive-through, just get out of this house. So yeah, I know it has been a struggle. Just I think for a lot of people, especially people who are used to being able to get out and like leave and go to work and, you know, and all of that. So I think we all, you know, like one of the big things I know I've heard a lot, especially in, I think in a lot of the romance chats and stuff, is just that, you know, like we all recognize that everybody's got something going on and it's hard. But luckily we have your books to read. So, so that's where I turn to when I need to like do something. I pick up a book and read it. So, so before we move on, we do have a question from the chat. It's from Ryan, and they're asking, considering as sci-fi and fantasy have rules in their worlds, are there rules that have created a challenge or has subverting them in a compelling way challenged you? That's a good question.
Yes and no. I think that I'm constantly aware of the tropes and pitfalls and expectations that come with writing in science fiction and fantasy. You know, in order for you to write in a genre, you have to love that genre. You have to respect that genre. And especially the readers, right? You have to respect the genre readers. And so I never want to write a book where I'm like, the happily ever after is coming and then oops, just, you know, the couple drives their happily ever after car off a cliff and they're dead, right? That is a disrespect to the genre, but you're subverting a trope. You're subverting expectations, right? So I think as writers, our balance is figuring out how to surprise a reader by subverting expectations, but staying within the frame of those expectations. And that line is a very, very tightrope. It's a tightrope. So I'll give you an example. My book Labyrinth Lost, which is a young adult fantasy, urban fantasy set in Brooklyn. It's book 1 of the Brooklyn Bruja series. And it's, you know, a series about, I asked the question, what if the Charmed sisters were Latinas? And then that series was born. So Labyrinth Lost, my main character, Alex, she curses her family. They go to another dimension. And she goes with her best friend, Rishi, who's a girl, and this mysterious brujo named Nova, who's a boy. And instantly, like, I wrote Nova as a red herring because I never intended for him to be a love interest. People still want him to be a love interest, but I'm just like, no. Spoiler alert. If you haven't read it, I'm sorry, but it's fine. This is for learning. And so we go to this other realm, and because the convention of YA romance is when you have 3 people who look at each other, they're automatically in love, right? You have a cute boy who takes his shirt off because I don't know, he was like using it for a bandage or something. I don't remember. Clearly he's the love interest.
Right.
And then you have a young girl whose confidence waffles because she needs to reclaim her magic, her power. And so obviously she's gonna be in love with this confident guy. But I didn't want to do that. However, I understood the expectations of young adult readers. And to this day, when 4 or 5 years later, 4 years later, people are reading this book and they're like, I didn't expect this to happen. And so that is a way I feel like I was successful in subverting this young adult trope within staying within the rules of they're not real rules, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
I tell people all the time. But the quote unquote rules of the book. Sorry, I keep getting notifications. My friend Sarah Younger is sending me TikToks.
That's my agent.
Like, hey, I want a panel.
Did I text her?
Yeah. Anyway, so that would be I hope that answers the question, Ryan.
I think so. Yeah, and just a reminder to everyone watching, if you do have questions for our authors, please put them in the chat and I will ask them. So my next question is, I asked this last week in my chat with Melanie Johnson and Angelina M. Lopez. We had a really fun chat last Friday. And I asked them if they had any advice for their younger writing selves, what would it be?
Take your time. I think that I rushed everything. I was like, oh my God, I'm 19. My novel's been rejected in all of publishing. I'm never going to write a book ever again. That was like literally a conversation that I had with myself. And it's not true. It's not, publishing will always be there unless like there's an apocalypse, but publishing is going to be there and you will be able to tell your story. You don't have to be a young writer to be shiny. Leigh Bardugo didn't sell her first book until I think she was in her late 30s. And now she's one of the biggest authors in the world. There's no expiration to success. And so when I was younger, it's just the idea of being successful is like so glamorous. And then I quickly realized that the least glamorous life of art is the writer lifestyle. Unless you're in that 1% of the writers that do have, glamorous lives. But for the most part, I would say take your time, relax. What about you, Alexis?
Yeah, I think probably the advice that I needed like about everything was like, it's not that serious. Like, don't take it so seriously. Just keep having fun with it. Because when I would take it too seriously, I would stop. And when I was having fun with it, I would just do like, like random like live journal RPG fanfic stuff, and it was super fun, but it was also really great writing practice. But then I would be like, well, this one is like a novel and I wrote an outline, so it's like serious business now. And for a long time, the one time I tried to write with an outline, it didn't go well. So I was like, outlines are terrible. And then, so I never tried it again for a long time and never finished anything. So I guess that would be my other thing, would be like, educate yourself earlier. Like just learn about it so that you can break the rules. But just, it's worth having knowledge. Because now I'm like a diehard plotter.
That's one of my later questions, kind of at the end, rapid fire. But are you guys plotters or pantsters? So Alexis answered. What are you, Zoraida?
I'm also a hardcore plotter. I have to because I constantly have a lot of deadlines, and if I could write like a book every 5 years or take like 10 years to write a book, and there are some authors who are like that, I would throw the outline out the window or put in the shredder or buy a shredder so I can put it in the shredder. And you're in my shot. uh, and then, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
You shred the outline.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would shred the outline. And then after that, I would just write a book, like just write it however I felt like it. But right at the moment, I have devised my own form of outline, Blake Snyder beat sheet, the 3-act structure, the hero's journey, a combination of all three. And I'm determined to figure out an outline for Pantsers. And I know that doesn't make sense, but I think that even a pantser needs a set of rules or guidelines. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be like my journey for the next like few weeks, is like figuring this out. Because I'm going to get ready to outline a new book in September. And so I'm going to have all of that.
Yeah, the fact that we're both plotters is what made us put this panel together.
Awesome. Yeah.
I would pants books, and, for a long time, I just couldn't finish anything. And then I finally was like, damn it, I got to finish a book. Reach the end. And then I did that a few times, and I was like, God, these are like, I love these stories, but they're such a mess. I can't even, try to query them because I can't fix them. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how. And I thought there has to be a better way.
Yeah.
And, if I do some of the work up front, then it should make the drafting faster and then hopefully make the revision easier. And that was my goal, was to make it easier to revise the book. So that's when I started plotting. And then the first time that I did that, I was like, oh shoot, this actually really works. It's way less painful.
Yeah, and I think it's like also the way our minds work, because my friends call me a chaos kitten. And I think that is true for many reasons, but also because I have a very chaotic way of outlining, where I will outline 3 different ways so that before I start writing, just because I need it to make sense. But at the same time, I think that if you are not a plotter at all, the one thing that can help you is to remember the motivation, like, why are we here? And I think that creating conflict and therefore tension is what's going to keep your book moving along, even if you don't have a specific plot for your book. You just have to remember conflict and tension.
Yeah, I think if like a little bit about your character, like what is the thing that's holding them back from whatever it is they want, and then at the end of the book, are they going to get over that thing, or is it going to overcome them? Mm-hmm. And then you basically have your story.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we have a really fun question from Jen in the audience. And she asks, if one day you woke up and automatically found yourself in one of your novels, who would you be and what would you be doing?
Oh, man. I don't know. This is so hard, because I really love all of my fantasy worlds. And I want to say A Crash of Fate, Star Wars, because the world of Batuu, I know I'm going to sound like an advertisement for Disney, but that's literally what I am. The world of Batuu is just so cool. And I would want to be one of the bartenders at Olga's Cantina on the Outpost, because then I get to see all of the people that are coming in and out and buying their fuzzy tauntauns and whatever, right? And then I get to listen to DJ Rex spinning his tunes. And it's just a fun world. So that would be one of them. Obviously, I feel like I should be expected to talk about like my original work, but or say like I would live in the world of Stripped, because hey, sexy guys who are not aggro and love each other. But I'm just gonna say
Star Wars too. Yeah. I don't know, like, I can't dance, so I don't know that I would like last super long on the dance.
Could you be a judge?
Oh, I would love to be a judge. Yeah. Okay, that's better. That's a much better answer than what I have, because I was like, be in the family of this, but it's like there's so much of it that's like close to my own family. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Do
this
you know
is
what
Puerto
you
Rican
are?
family in Castle Hill in the Bronx. Like,
Do you know what you're the director of You Had Me at Ola, technically.
Yeah.
Because you're doing all of this stuff. You're the puppeteer, the puppet
I'm a
master.
showrunner.
Yeah.
I am literally the showrunner. Look, I think it would be super fun to be a judge.
Yeah, that sounds, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely one of those people when I am watching like a dance show or even like a cooking show and I was like, no, it's too much salt. There's not gonna, you know, or like, oh, their toes weren't pointed on that spin. And, you know, I'm like one of the, like sitting at home judging people.
Yeah,
I
like
have
an
no
armchair
idea.
judge. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I wrote the Dance Off series. I was like, I watch Dancing with the Stars. Like, I can totally do this. And I
Love
was like, oh no, I need to do a lot of research.
it. Yeah, that's awesome. So I was going to ask, aside from reading and writing, what have you both been doing to pass the time during the pandemic?
Crying in the shower, drinking wine.
Yeah, I drank a lot of gin at the beginning.
Me too.
Like,
I just bought like a liter of Beefeater, and
I've been
It's
buying
tonic.
Hendrix, which is not cheap. And my boyfriend was like, why don't you get one that's cheaper? And I was like, I don't want any of the other ones.
like I deserve this. Okay.
Like really like the fancier ginger ale in my, grocery order. Like that and some lime. And I'm like, all right, I've got a Moscow Mule here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Gin. I have been doing jigsaw puzzles and listening to audiobooks.
I've seen a lot of your puzzles. They look intense. I would give up after like not being able to find 2 pieces.
The last one I did with this dragon was so freaking hard. Like I really had a moment where I was like, this is impossible. I can't do this. But the combination and like, this is totally like a distraction and escape and is probably not super healthy, but like whatever. Like toward the beginning of the pandemic, we were just like watching the news nonstop, and that was terrible. And then we just started watching Cuomo's updates because Zoraida and I are both in New York, and even that, I was like, I just need to stop.
Yeah.
There was a period of time where I watched Cuomo's updates for like every day for weeks.
Yeah.
And I was glued to it, because like I had to. My uncles were sick. I was like, and it was awful.
I know it was
terrible
also
time.
Information we were getting though.
Yeah, it's like, and then one day it's like masks are good, gloves are bad, gloves are good, masks are, like it's just it's the seesaw of feelings. And so I think that one of my real answer is that I watched a lot of TV that was familiar to me, like TV shows I loved. Like I rewatched The Vampire Diaries and Supernatural, and I did those things, and also my deadlines didn't stop. So there was I don't know, an editor or somebody was like, writers are just writing so much more right now, and I'm like, what writers are you talking about? Oh, it was in PW, it was in Publishers Weekly, where it was like, writers should just have so much more time to write, and I'm like, no, what about the writers who have kids and their kids can't go to school, so now they're home all the time? And so it was just like, I was like, I don't know what world this person's living in, but like I know writers are writing less.
Having existential crises like everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
So listening to the audiobooks and doing the puzzles like really engages like all of my attention, so I just can't think about anything else. I also like early on, because like couldn't go to restaurants and we couldn't order anything, and I had ordered so much food at the beginning, I was like cooking and cleaning my kitchen every single day, which has never been and that just like kind of became this routine. Like we would just kind of get through the day, like watching TV, watching the news, doing a puzzle or whatever, and then I'd be like, okay, it's 5 o'clock, it's dinner time. Like we would like make a couple of drinks and like I would put on my headphones and clean the kitchen and cook something.
Yeah, I think the pandemic, for whatever reason, has like bumped up our meal times. Like, I feel like we eat breakfast, and it's like we get up and we eat breakfast right away. And then it was like, it's 11, let's have lunch. And then 5 o'clock, I'm ready for dinner. It was so strange. So,
I
yeah.
think because I stopped snacking.
Maybe. Yeah.
So I don't know, just like being home all the time and
Yeah.
actually having groceries, like I was like, wow, this is like amazing to just always have food in house.
Right. Oh, that's good. Okay, so Ryan has this is another fun question. He's asking if either, or they are asking if either of Zoraida's characters met any of Alexis's characters, what would they think of each other, and would they hang out or would they fight?
Okay, I'm gonna go with the characters from Stripped and Hired, like from that series. I think that they would do good because my girl, I have a Latino love interest in each one. In Flashed, it's a girl named Lena. In Stripped, it's a girl named Robin, and in Hired, the main character's name is Aiden, and he's Latino too. So I think that like they would I just based on that they would yeah.
My first thought actually was that they could, like, there's a scene in You Had Me at Hola where they go do karaoke, and I was like, that would be super fun. But I think they would get along really well with the characters from the dance off.
Yeah,
dancers.
Yes, they are all dancers.
And there was like a scene in Take the Lead where Stone, the hero, does like a boylesque inspired dance number in like little gold lame.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yes. Okay. Yes.
So I feel like they would all like bond really well and like have a lot of fun. They could like go to Dimitri's house and dance with me and like have fun.
Oh, and Flash takes place in Montana, so your Alaska guy would just be like,
right at home.
Right at home. Hey, it's cold. Let's just hang out.
Crossover.
Road trip in Denali.
Okay. Yeah. So one of my favorite questions to ask authors is for book recommendations. So what have you guys been reading or trying to read, if you will, and what you'd like to recommend to everybody watching?
I'm almost at the end of The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. The audiobook is fantastic. It is just so absorbing, and it's a fantasy story with like gods and people, and I don't know. There's so much, I don't even know how to describe it. So I would definitely recommend that one. And then Adriana Herrera has a romance coming out next week, maybe. I don't know what day it is anymore.
Yeah, it comes out next Tuesday.
Yeah, it's called Here to Stay, and it's about the Gotham Exiles Club. It's a bunch of people who are from New York City, but who are all living and working in Dallas, Texas. So it's just like a great premise and great setup with a great cast of characters, but also the romance itself has a lot of like really cute and sweet moments, but a lot of like inherent conflict in terms of what the heroine is doing, what the hero is doing.
Right.
And yeah, that's a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently listening to the audiobook for Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And that is a horror novel set in, I think, the 50s Mexico. And it's really, really beautiful and weird. And there's like all this gross mushroom stuff. Everyone keeps talking about the mushrooms when they talk about this book.
I have the audiobook, but I'm like trying to go through my library home.
The audiobook is fantastic because the narrator is Frankie Corzo, who did the audiobook for my book Incendiary. So I'm a little bit biased, but Frankie is a Cuban American girl, and she has a phenomenal voice. I just love listening to her. And then another one that I'm going to start reading is A Lesson in Thorns by Sierra Simone, who's one of my favorite writers. Her book Sinner is still today like one of my favorite romances. And this book is a little weird. It takes place on this like manor in like this like fog shrouded moors called Thornchapel. And it's, her writing is just so, it's like a perfect mix of like pleasure and pain. in the way that she describes things and the way that she creates characters. And she really unpacks kink in like a very beautiful way, because she unravels sex and passion and love on the page. And she's just such a phenomenal writer. And if you like YA, I recently read A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown, which is a fantasy in which a princess who is about to become a queen, she needs the heart of a king in order to do a spell. And so there are these games that are happening in her kingdom, and she offers the winner her hand in marriage. So she instantly has a king to sacrifice. But the boy that is about to win this championship, they start to fall in love. So like, can she kill him? It's really great. It's the first in a trilogy. It was an instant New York Times bestseller. It's called A Song of Wraiths and Ruin.
I had that audiobook too on
The audiobook is great. I listened to an audio.
I also would add, just tying up all of the sci-fi and romance stuff together, the Consortium Rebellion series by Jessie Mihalik is like fun spacefaring adventure where of course they all fall in love too, but there's also like this like corrupt society that they kind of have to take down and circumvent. So and just like it's a really great slow burn romance.
Yeah.
Okay. I have one more, which is The Spectral City by Leanna Renee Heber, which is a series set in turn of the century New York. So it's gaslamp fiction. There are ghosts, there are psychics, there's like a hot detective, hot Jewish detective, and a young girl who can see spirits. And they're very, 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 very slow burn. God, Leanna. So she's one of my favorite writers and a good friend. So I love her work. It's called The Spectral City.
Yeah. Leanna is awesome and does so much for romance and the book community.
Definitely. Okay, Ryan has one more question from our audience. Are there older or childhood influences that have or continue to influence your writing? Do these older media have lasting lessons in craft, theme, or inspiration that provide resonance for you?
This book, so You Had Me at Hola, the main actress in it, the heroine, is a soap opera actress. And while I don't watch too many now, I really kind of like had to dig back into remembering how I did watch them back in the day. Like I used to watch The Young and the Restless, and there was this teen soap opera called Swan's Crossing. If anybody knows it, mention it in the comments on the YouTube chat and let me know, because I used to wake up like early before school to watch this. And Sarah Michelle Gellar was on it, and Brittany Daniel, who then was on the Sweet Valley High TV show with her real twin sister, was on it. And I think Mira Sorvino was on it. Like it was, yeah, right?
Wow.
And I was like,
you just took me back.
I was like in 4th grade, I think, and I would like wake up early to watch it before school. So those kind of stories that were like just these like huge stories. I used to watch 90210 also when it came out when I was a child. I don't know why my mom let me watch that.
Me
like,
too. Well, my mom was at work, so like, and my uncles were at work.
Watch it with me. And like Melrose Place. My mom was like, "Oh, let's watch Melrose Place tonight." I was like, "Mom, I'm like 7."
Oh my God.
I was probably a little older when Melrose Place came on, but I like these were the kind of stories that I was filling up on. In addition to like all of the Disney afternoon cartoons and like Girls and stuff like that, Full House, but these kind of like larger than life storylines and like high drama. So the earliest stuff that I wrote was actually the stuff that I played with my Barbie dolls, but the stuff I played with my Barbie dolls was based on these kind of soap opera or these stories. So I think that has just kind of like always been in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really realize it until working on this book and then people asking me about it. And then I was like, oh yeah, that's like really part of like my storytelling DNA.
Right.
So I think that
Is that Luke Skywalker?
I'm holding him for a reason. So when I was a kid, my mom's coworker gave her all of his Star Wars toys. It was like boxes
Wow.
of toys, and this is one of them.
Oh my God.
And I was like, to this day, I think about this guy, like, what happened in his life? That did somebody make him give up his toys? Like, what happened? And anyway, so I would make this Luke Skywalker make out with my Barbies. And that, predicted some of the fiction that I would write in the future. But also, like Alexis, I was a product of that, like, late 90s, early 2000s TV, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, Dawson's Creek, like I was not allowed to watch Dawson's Creek, but I would watch it anyway. Because my mom would fall asleep at like 8:00, or after the novella. So like I would just watch reruns. And so I think that the reason why it is important to think about your influences, it's because the first books that you're going to write are going to be echo books. They're going to echo the things that you loved, the things that made you. And then once you learn your voice and you learn what you believe and all of these things, maybe you already know, maybe I'm just like, talking out of my ass, but every book is going to be in conversation with the things that you love. And so I didn't read a lot of romance in the beginning I stopped reading romance because like all the stories were about white people and there were no real there were not a plethora of Latina romance writers like there are now. And so that I just was just like, this is not for me. Like, I don't want to read the same like Hallmark story, there's nothing wrong with those stories, right? But they belong to a lot of people, but they're not the only stories that should be told. And so I rejected a lot of fiction because I didn't think it was representative of me. And then I'm able to write fiction now and give those stories like Alexis, like Adriana Herrera, like Priscilla Oliveras, like all of these, Sabrina Sol, like all of these storytellers now I'm just like, I'm like hungry to keep writing. And so now I'm in conversation with all of these other books that are coming out, your contemporaries. When I write my YA fantasy, I'm in conversation, my new Bruja book has fairies, like a Caribbean fairyland. And so I'm in conversation with Holly Black, who was my favorite writer as a teenager. I didn't say child. No, I was a teenager. She was my favorite writer and she still is. And so I'm literally in conversation with her books, her fairy books, and then my Latino fairy books. And so everything, I never say that we need to get rid of like, any canon. I think that like if you're writing about Regency romance or Georgian romance, you want to be in conversation with Jane Austen. I don't think Jane Austen stories should ever go away. I think like we should just add more stories and be in conversation with those things, and that's how we just keep making stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that's so good. I'm thinking about like everything I've written as you're talking. Like my first novel that I really attempted, like when I was 21, was basically a teen vampire novel, harkening back to the fanfic that I was writing about like L.J. Smith books when I was an actual teenager. Mm-hmm. And that feeling at that kind of like early aughts era, like after watching Buffy and like reading all of these like urban fantasy books like that, and really feeling like, yeah, like we're just not being seen in that way. Mm-hmm. And then wanting to write ourselves into those stories too. So it's saying, okay, that, but like make it Latinx, like,
yeah.
Or make it more diverse in different ways. So it's also finding those kind of like holes in what we wish existed.
Yeah.
Writing those stories too.
Yeah. And like maybe in 10 years, somebody's going to write a book and be like, I'm in conversation with Labyrinth Lost and just going to make it like super extra queer, even though it's already queer. Like I'm just gonna do the thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the best part about fiction. It's like the limit does not exist.
Yeah, I love that. I just want to say thank you to everyone who did submit questions. They were really awesome. They were really like thoughtful and great. So that's really cool. So it's about time to wrap up. But before we go, I wanted to ask you both what we can expect from you next, if you can tell us.
All right, Zoraida, you've got something coming out soon, so you go ahead.
Yes, I have the third and final book in the Brooklyn Brujas series. It's called Wayward Witch, and the youngest of the Mortiz sisters, Rose, she gets kidnapped and taken to a fairyland. She's 15 years old and she has a lot of opinions, and she's like, fairyland is weird, but it's a fairyland set in the middle of the Caribbean. It's hidden, and it's populated by my own mythologies and my own gods that I've created for this Bruja Witch series. That comes out September 1st. On September 22nd, if there are any vampire fans out there, I have an anthology which I co-edited with Natalie C. Parker, the author of Seafire. And our anthology is called Vampires Never Get Old. And it is 11 tales with fresh bite. There are authors like Julie Murphy, the author of Dumpling, Victoria Schwab, the author of the Darker Shade of Magic series, and Addie LaRue, Danielle Clayton, Marco Shiro. We have like a lineup of amazing authors sort of reinventing the vampire canon. And so I'm really excited about that. That comes out September 22nd. So
also, Zoraida has a podcast to
Yeah.
go along with the book. And the first
Yes.
episode is about the book Silver Kiss, which I also read as a teenager, although I didn't remember a lot of those things. So,
yeah, if you like podcasts, Natalie and I are going through vampire literature from the early 90s and early, the new millennium, and sort of like dissecting the themes and rereading a lot of it and being like, he pees on her doorstep to claim his property. This vampire is crazy. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And you also have a great pre-order campaign for Wayward Witch, because I already pre-ordered it.
Thank you. I'm so excited. So if you want to order from Astoria Bookshop, that is where the print comes from. But if you order from any other bookstore, I will send you a holographic sticker, which is very shiny and has this beautiful iris from the cover. So it's all good stuff.
And for me, You Had Me at Hola just came out. Love Sweet Arrow has or will have more signed copies from me. And then I'm also going to be sending more of these stickers of Jasmine and Ashton with them. And I'm currently working on the second book of that series. It's going to be about Jasmine's cousin, Michelle. And then I also am working on writing a cozy mystery with amateur Latinx sleuths in New York City. So
I'm very excited for all of that.
Amazing. Everything sounds awesome. I'm so excited to learn more. So yeah, that about wraps things up. I just want to say thank you to everyone who was watching. Of course, thank you to both of you for joining me and Love Sweet Arrow tonight. And then just one more final reminder, everyone, head into lovesweetarrow.com. You can get Alexis and Zoraida's books there, as well as a lot of fun other stuff. And I know that they are working on booking more events in the coming weeks. So yeah, this was really fun. Thank you guys so much.
thanks for having us, Love Sweet Arrow. And
thank you.
All. And thanks to everyone watching.
Thank you. If you order from Love Sweet Arrow, I will send you a book plate. You just email me your receipt at zoraidabooks@gmail.com.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. We will hopefully see you all soon. Thank you.